Get the luggage, maid.
Baby, it's me, it's your mom.
The moment they stepped off that private jet, I knew my life was about to change. But I never imagined it would shatter in ways I couldn't even comprehend. I stood there at the airport, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. My palms were sweating, my legs felt weak. After years of sacrifice, of working jobs that broke my back and soul, my 3 children were finally coming home. They were successful. They had made it. They had promised me a better life, and I believed them with every fiber of my being. Mom, I heard one of them shout from across the tarmac. My eyes filled with tears immediately. I started walking toward them, my arms already open, ready to embrace the fruits of my labor, the evidence that everything I'd endured had meant something. But then I stopped dead in my tracks, while one of my sons looked at me with cold, hollow eyes and said something I will never forget as long as I live.
Get the luggage, maid.
Get the luggage, maid. That single word hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. Hey everyone, it's Precify Stories. Before we continue, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single story. Like this video, and I want to see you comment your country in the comment section right now. Let's go. My name is Yolanda Vaughn, and this is my story. Not the story you think you know, but the real one. The one that will change everything you believe about sacrifice, betrayal, and what it truly means to build someone else's dreams. Let me take you back to where it all began. 28 years ago in Cleveland, Ohio, I was a young woman full of hope. I was married to a man named Andre Booker. He was charming, at least that's what I thought in those early days. We had dreams together. We talked about building a family, creating a legacy, raising children who would change the world. I believed every word he said to me. When I found out I was pregnant, I was overjoyed. But when the doctor told me I was carrying triplets, my joy turned into something else entirely. Fear mixed with excitement. How would we manage 3 babies at once? I remember Andre's face that day. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate with me. He just stared at the ultrasound screen with an expression I couldn't quite read. I should have known right then that something was wrong. The pregnancy was difficult. I was exhausted all the time carrying the weight of 3 developing lives inside my body. Andre was working, or so he said. He'd leave early in the morning and come home late at night. Sometimes he wouldn't come home at all. I told myself it was because he was working hard, preparing for our 3 babies. I was naive. I was hopeful. I was a fool. When I went into labor, the contractions hit me like waves of lightning. I called Andre at work, my voice shaking with pain and fear. The babies are coming, I told him. We need to go to the hospital now. He was there within 30 minutes. I remember thinking, see, he does care. He's here. I was wrong about so many things. The labor lasted 16 hours. 16 hours of pain that I cannot adequately describe. But when my 3 babies finally came into the world, when I heard their cries for the first time, I forgot every ounce of suffering. I had 3 perfect children, 2 sons and 1 daughter. Now, they were beautiful. They were mine. They were everything I had dreamed of and more. But the happiness didn't last long. I was in the hospital bed, still bleeding, my body aching in ways I'd never experienced before. I was exhausted beyond belief, but I couldn't stop staring at my babies. They were sleeping peacefully, unaware of the world that awaited them. Andre stood in the doorway, looking at them with an expression I couldn't understand. Andre, I called to him softly. Come see them. Come see our babies. He walked toward the bassinet slowly, almost reluctantly. He looked down at the 3 tiny humans we had created together, and then he turned to me with eyes that had gone completely cold. They're not mine, he said flatly. I thought I had misheard him. The painkillers, the exhaustion, just the overwhelming emotions of giving birth must have distorted his words. What? I whispered. They're not mine, he repeated louder this time. I don't know who the father is, but it's not me. These children don't belong to me. The room started spinning. I felt like I was drowning. Andre, what are you talking about? Of course they're yours. We've been together for years. You know this doesn't make sense." But he had already turned away. He walked toward the door without another word. "Andre, wait!" I called out, panic rising in my throat. "Please, we need to talk about this, please." He paused at the door, his hand on the frame. When he turned back to look at me, there was nothing in his eyes. No love, no compassion, no humanity, just emptiness. "You figure out who the father is," he said coldly. You tell them to take care of you and these children because I'm done." And then he was gone. I lay there in that hospital bed, tears streaming down my face, my body broken and bleeding, my heart completely shattered. A nurse came in moments later, sensing something was wrong. I couldn't even speak. I just pointed toward my babies and cried. The hospital staff was kind to me in those first few days, but I could see the judgment in their eyes. They thought I had cheated on my husband. They thought I had brought this upon myself. Nobody asked me what really happened. Nobody asked if I was okay. They just looked at me with a mixture of pity and disdain. His family didn't come to see the babies. His mother, his father, his siblings, they all abandoned us without hesitation. I called his mother 3 times from the hospital phone. She didn't answer any of my calls. Finally, on the 4th attempt, she picked up. "Mrs. Booker," I said, my voice trembling. "It's Yolanda. I had the babies. They're beautiful. Andre said he's going to be here soon to pick us up, but he hasn't shown up yet. Can you help me reach him?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Listen to me," she said finally, her voice sharp and cutting. "My son already told us about your little situation. We don't want anything to do with bastard children. Don't call this house again." She hung up on me. I remember holding the phone in my hand, listening to the dial tone, feeling like my entire world had collapsed. I was alone. I had 3 newborn babies and I was completely, utterly alone. But I didn't have time to fall apart. My babies needed me. Now, even though my body was screaming with pain, even though my heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest, I had to get up. I had to take care of these 3 tiny humans who depended entirely on me for survival. When I was released from the hospital 5 days later, Andre didn't come to pick me up. I took a taxi home with all 3 babies, navigating the difficult task of getting 3 car seats into the vehicle while still bleeding and barely able to walk. The taxi driver didn't help me. He just watched from the front seat, shaking his head. The apartment I went to was one that Andre had paid for, but when I arrived, I found his things were gone. His clothes, his personal items, everything. He had cleaned out his half of our life while I was in the hospital giving birth to his children. Yeah, that's when I truly understood. I was on my own. The first year was a blur of survival. I didn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. There were 3 babies who needed feeding every few hours, 3 babies who cried, 3 babies who required constant attention and care. I had no help, no partner, no family support, just me and my 3 children in a 1-bedroom apartment trying to figure out how to survive. I breastfed all 3, which meant my body was constantly drained. I lost weight rapidly. My hair started falling out. I developed dark circles under my eyes that seemed permanent. But every time I looked at my babies, I found the strength to keep going. They hadn't asked to be born into this situation. They were innocent, and they deserved a mother who would fight for them. I worked whenever I could find work. Yet I started with odd jobs, babysitting for other families, cleaning houses on weekends, anything that would bring in money. It was difficult because I had to bring the triplets with me sometimes. Some families didn't want to hire me because I had 3 babies. Others hired me and then paid me less than they promised because they said the children were too disruptive. I remember one particular job that stands out in my memory. I was cleaning a house for a family named the Reynolds. They lived in a beautiful home in a nice neighborhood in Cleveland. While I was cleaning their bathroom, their young daughter came in and saw my triplets sitting in the living room watching a children's show on the television. "Why do they have to be here?" she asked me with disgust. "It's so annoying." I wanted to say something, but I didn't. But I just kept cleaning. I needed that job too badly. When I was done cleaning, the mother of the family, Belinda Reynolds, paid me in cash. But it was significantly less than what we had agreed on. "What's this?" I asked carefully, not wanting to cause any trouble. "Well," she said, not meeting my eyes, "you had your children here the whole time, so they were a distraction. I'm paying you what I think the work was worth." I needed that money for formula and diapers. I couldn't argue. I just took it and left. Those early years were the hardest of my life. There were nights when I didn't eat so that my children could eat. There were times when I went without shoes in the winter because I needed to buy them winter boots. There were moments when I sat alone in the dark, after all 3 children were finally asleep, and I allowed myself to cry. Yet I cried for the life I thought I would have. I cried for the abandonment. I cried for the unfairness of it all. But I never cried in front of my children. I made sure that every single day, no matter how hard it was, I showed them love. I read to them. I sang to them. I held them when they were scared or sick. I was their mother, their father, their protector, and their entire world. And I was determined that my sacrifice would mean something. When the triplets were 4 years old, I managed to get them into a public school in the countryside outside of Cleveland. The school was good, and it meant I could work more hours without having to pay for childcare. I was working 3 jobs by that point: cleaning homes, working as a cleaner at a local office building, and doing laundry for wealthy families in the area. It was exhausting. And my body was always aching. My hands were raw from cleaning chemicals. My back was bent from carrying children and lifting heavy loads. But my children were in school, they were getting an education, and they were getting out of the poverty that surrounded us. The office building where I worked as a cleaner was called the Whitfield Commerce Center. It was a tall building in downtown Cleveland with dozens of companies operating out of it. My job was to clean the floors, empty the trash, wipe down the bathrooms, and keep everything looking pristine for the people who worked there during the day. The other cleaners didn't like me much. I was friendly, but I didn't gossip with them the way they did. I didn't complain about my life, and I didn't participate in their drama. I think that made them suspicious of me. Or maybe they just sensed that I was different, that I had a purpose beyond just earning minimum wage. One day, as I was cleaning the hallway on the 15th floor, I saw a posting on the wall. It was a job announcement for a training program. The company that occupied that floor was a major investment and financial services firm called Goodwin Capital. They were looking for candidates to apply for an intensive training program that would prepare people for entry-level positions in the financial sector. The requirements were basic: high school diploma or equivalent, willingness to learn, and commitment to the program. As I read the posting, something stirred inside me. This could be a way out. This could be my chance to build a better life for my children. I was terrified. I had never worked in that kind of environment before. That I had no experience in finance or business, but I thought about my 3 children and I filled out the application right there in the hallway while I was supposed to be working. When I turned in the form, the receptionist barely looked at me. I was just the cleaning woman to her, invisible, insignificant. She took the form without making eye contact and threw it on a desk behind her. I didn't expect anything to come of it, but I had put my hope into that form and I held on to it. Weeks passed with no word. I continued working my 3 jobs, continuing to sacrifice everything for my children. My body was breaking down. I was only in my late 20s, but I felt ancient. The exhaustion was becoming more than physical. It was seeping into my soul. Then one day, as I was cleaning the office, a man called my name. His name was Reggie Hightower, and he was one of the senior managers at Goodwin Capital. He had my application in his hand. "Did you fill this out?" he asked, looking at me with surprise. "Yes, sir," I said, suddenly feeling very self-conscious. I was wearing my cleaning uniform, a plain gray outfit with a name tag. My hands were red and rough from cleaning supplies. "Why do you want to work in finance?" he asked. "It's a completely different field from what you're doing now." I could have lied. I could have given him the answer he probably wanted to hear. But something made me tell him the truth. "Because I have 3 children that I'm raising on my own," I said quietly. "And I want to give them a better life than this. I want to show them that no matter where you start, That you can change your circumstances if you work hard enough. He looked at me for a long moment and I saw something shift in his expression. It was understanding. It was compassion. It was the first time in years that someone had looked at me like my life mattered. The training program is intense, he said. It requires commitment. Are you prepared to do this while working your other jobs? Yes, sir, I said without hesitation.
We'll give you a chance.
I nearly fell to my knees right there in the hallway, but I held myself together until I was out of sight, and then I sat in my car and cried tears of hope for the first time in years. The training program was one of the most difficult things I've ever done. I would wake up at 4 a.m., get my children ready for school. I'd drop them at my neighbor's house, an older woman named Rochelle who took pity on me and helped me with childcare. Go to the training facility at Goodwin Capital, work there for 8 hours learning about finance, investments, and business operations, and then go to my evening cleaning job from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. I was living on maybe 4 hours of sleep a night. But I was determined. My fellow trainees were different from me. They came from wealthy backgrounds. They had attended private schools. They had family connections and networks. They looked at me with curiosity and sometimes with pity, but they treated me with respect because I worked harder than any of them. I studied late into the night when I got home. I read books about finance and economics. I asked endless questions in training. I wasn't naturally talented at the work, but I was committed in a way that few people are. 6 months into the program, I was doing better than expected. Reggie Hightower called me into his office. Yolanda, he said, we've been impressed with your progress. The training program ends in 3 months, and we'd like to offer you a position as a junior analyst with Goodwin Capital. It's an entry-level position, but it comes with benefits, health insurance, and a salary that's 3 times what you're making now. I felt like I was floating. 3 times my current income meant I could stop working 2 of my 3 jobs. It meant I could spend more time with my children. It meant my sacrifice was finally paying off. I accept, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. When I told my children that night, they didn't fully understand what it meant. But they understood that their mother was happy, and that was enough. I started my position at Goodwin Capital, and for the first time in years, I had hope. Real, tangible hope that my life was changing. My children were in school, doing well academically. I was working at a company that valued me. I had benefits. I had stability. But life has a way of reminding you that nothing is ever simple. 2 months after I started my job as a junior analyst, I noticed that some financial documents were missing from my desk. Not immediately missing. I was very organized, very careful. But over the course of a few weeks, certain files that I knew I had placed in a specific drawer were gone. I mentioned it to my supervisor, a woman named Carmen Whitfield, who was the daughter of one of the company's owners. She dismissed my concerns. Yolanda, she said, sometimes files get moved around. You're probably just misremembering. But I knew I wasn't misremembering. I was meticulous about my work. It was the only way I could prove that I deserved to be in this position despite my lack of formal background. Then one day, I was called into the HR office. My heart immediately started racing. I had done nothing wrong. I knew this, but something about the tone of the call felt ominous. When I walked into the HR office, I saw 3 people sitting behind a large desk. One of them was Carmen Whitfield. She wasn't meeting my eyes. Yolanda, said the HR director, a man named Terrence Watson, we need to talk to you about some missing documents. We have reason to believe that you may have taken them without authorization. My blood ran cold. What? I said, that's not possible. But I would never. We have evidence, he said, cutting me off. Several documents have gone missing from your desk, and they've been found in your possession. They haven't been found in my possession, I said, my voice rising slightly. I don't have any documents. And more importantly, why would I steal from a company that just gave me my first real opportunity? Carmen Whitfield finally spoke up. We've been watching you, Yolanda. We know about your background. We know you came from nothing. We know you're desperate. It's not that surprising that you would resort to this. Those words hit me harder than any physical blow. She was saying that my poverty made me a criminal, that my desperation made me a thief, that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I proved myself, that I would always be seen as the poor woman from the wrong side of town. I didn't take anything, I said firmly, and I don't appreciate being accused of a crime I didn't commit. That's what they all say, Terrence said, shuffling some papers. We're going to have to let you go, effective immediately. We'll be forwarding the details of this incident to the police. I felt the world tilting beneath me. This job was everything. This was my way out. This was my ticket to giving my children a better life. You have to believe me, I said, desperation creeping into my voice. I didn't do this. Someone is setting me up. But it didn't matter what I said. They had already made up their minds. They saw a poor woman from a broken home and they assumed the worst of her. The fact that I had worked 3 jobs, that I had sacrificed everything for my children, that I had earned my place in that training program, none of that mattered. My poverty was my crime. I left the building in a daze. I sat in my car for hours, unable to move. I had just lost the one job that meant something. I had a police investigation hanging over my head. My children were at school, waiting for me to pick them up, completely unaware that their mother's world was crashing down around her. I picked them up that afternoon and took them home. I didn't tell them what had happened. I just held them and cried silently. Over the following weeks, the police investigated the alleged theft. I was questioned multiple times. They wanted to know about my financial situation, my debts, my desperation. It was clear that in their minds, desperation was the same as guilt. But eventually, the investigation went nowhere. There was no actual evidence that I had taken anything. The documents started reappearing in the company's files. It turned out that Carmen Whitfield had moved them herself, probably as part of some internal politics or territorial dispute that had nothing to do with me. But by that time, it didn't matter. I was fired, and no one at Goodwin Capital would speak up for me. Reggie Hightower, the man who had given me my first chance, was conspicuously absent during the entire ordeal. I later found out that he had been transferred to another office. He couldn't protect me even if he wanted to. I was devastated, but I refused to let it destroy me. I had survived worse. I had survived abandonment, poverty, and the judgment of an entire society that wanted to believe I was less than human. I could survive this too. And I went back to cleaning jobs, but I was smarter now. I was more careful. I saved every penny I could, and I never gave up on my children's education. My triplets were brilliant. All 3 of them excelled in school. They were kind-hearted and ambitious. They wanted to make their mother proud. They knew, even though I never explicitly told them, that their mother had sacrificed everything for them. When they were in high school, I was working 4 different cleaning jobs. I was exhausted beyond belief. My hands were permanently damaged from the cleaning chemicals. My back was bent from years of physical labor. But I kept going because I saw the potential in my children. One day, my oldest son, Maurice, came home with news. "Mom," he said, his eyes bright with excitement, "I got a scholarship, a full scholarship to study overseas. They're paying for everything, tuition, room and board, everything." I nearly collapsed. "What?" I whispered, not daring to believe it. "It's through Goodwin Capital," he said. "They have this program where they fund scholarships for students from underprivileged backgrounds. I applied without even telling you because I didn't think I had a chance, but they accepted me." When I heard the name Goodwin Capital, my heart clenched. The same company that had destroyed me, the same company that had accused me of stealing and fired me. But they were now helping my son, who was brilliant and deserving and innocent of any wrongdoing. Within weeks, both of my other children received the same scholarship from the same program. All 3 of my triplets were going to study abroad. That all 3 of them would have opportunities that I could have never given them on my own. The day they left for the airport was one of the most bittersweet days of my life. I was so proud I thought my heart might burst. But I was also terrified of losing them, of having them realize once they got out in the world that they didn't need their poor, broken mother anymore. As they were walking through the airport, My daughter, Latasha, turned back and grabbed my hand. "Mom," she said, tears in her eyes, "we're going to make it. We're going to become so successful, and we're going to take care of you. We promise. All the pain you've gone through, all the sacrifice, it's going to mean something. Trust us." I held her and cried. "I love you so much," I whispered. "We love you too," she said, "and we're going to change our lives." "All for you." They left me standing in that airport, and I felt like I was watching the best parts of myself walk away. For the first few months, they called me regularly. They told me about their classes, their new friends, the exciting experiences they were having. They told me about the beautiful cities where they were studying. I lived vicariously through their stories. But as time went on, the calls became less frequent. They were busy with their studies. They were making new friends. They were building their own lives. I understood. I didn't want to be a burden to them. Still, I waited for those calls. I organized my cleaning schedule around their time zones, so I would be available when they called. I saved every penny I could so that if they needed anything, I would be able to help them. Years passed. I was now in my 40s, and my body was paying the price for decades of physical labor. I had chronic pain in my back. I had developed arthritis in my hands. I was always tired, but I kept working because my children were still studying, and I wanted to be able to help if they needed me. The calls from my children became even rarer. Months would pass without hearing from them. I tried not to feel hurt by this. I told myself that they were focused on building their futures, and that was what mattered. But then I got sick. It started with a persistent cough that wouldn't go away. I thought it was just exhaustion, just my body finally giving out. But the cough got worse. Then I developed a fever. I tried to keep working, but I was too weak. I finally went to the doctor, something I rarely did because I couldn't afford it. After running some tests, the doctor looked at me with concern and said that my body had essentially broken down from years of stress and overwork. I was suffering from multiple health issues: chronic fatigue, anxiety, high blood pressure, and a respiratory infection. "You need to rest," the doctor told me. "You need to take time off work and let your body recover." But I couldn't afford to take time off. Without my paycheck, I couldn't pay my rent. So I went back to work, even though I was still sick. During this time, I tried calling my children repeatedly. I left messages asking them to call me back. I wasn't trying to burden them with my problems. I just wanted to hear their voices. I wanted to feel connected to them. They didn't call back. I told myself they were busy. I told myself they would explain when they finally did call. But deep down, I was terrified. I had sacrificed everything for them, and now, when I needed them most, I felt completely abandoned. I spent weeks in a fog of illness and despair. I was alone in my apartment in Cleveland, cleaning other people's homes during the day and crying at night. No one checked on me. No one asked if I was okay. My children, who I had bled for, who I had given everything for, weren't there. It was Rochelle, my old neighbor, who finally saved my life. She came over one day and found me barely able to get out of bed. She called an ambulance without asking my permission. She stayed with me in the hospital. She brought me food and sat with me for hours, just keeping me company. "Why don't your children come see you?" she asked gently one day. I didn't have an answer. I didn't know. Eventually, I recovered enough to go back to work. But something inside me had broken. The hope that had sustained me for so many years had dimmed considerably. I still believed in my children, still believed they would come through for me. But the unwavering faith had been shaken. Then, about a year after my illness, I started hearing rumors. People came up to me while I was cleaning and whispered that my children had made it big overseas. They had become wealthy. They had built successful businesses. They were coming home. At first, I didn't believe it. But then more people started saying the same thing. People from my neighborhood, people I barely knew, all coming up to me with the same news. Your children are coming home and they're rich now. I felt a surge of emotions: joy, relief, vindication. Everything I had sacrificed, everything I had endured had been for this. Till my children had made it. They were successful. And they were coming home. I allowed myself to imagine what life would be like. Maybe they would help me with my medical bills. Maybe we could move to a nicer apartment. Maybe I could finally stop working so hard. Maybe I could rest. For the first time in years, I had something to look forward to. I bought myself a new outfit for their arrival. It wasn't expensive. I couldn't afford expensive, but it was the nicest thing I owned. I got my hair done at the local salon. I wanted to look good when I saw them. I wanted them to see that their mother was still holding on, still trying, still fighting. The day they were supposed to arrive, I went to the airport early. I stood in the arrivals area, my heart pounding, watching the doors for any sign of them. And then I saw them. But they weren't walking off a commercial airplane. They were stepping out of a luxury car that pulled right up to the curb. And behind them, I could see a private jet on the tarmac. My children had arrived in their own private jet. I stood there frozen, unable to process what I was seeing. They had truly made it. They had gone from nothing to everything. I started walking toward them, my arms already open, tears streaming down my face. I was so proud. I was so happy. I couldn't wait to hold them, but as I got closer, I saw their faces. They looked at me, and I saw something in their eyes that made my blood run cold. It wasn't joy. It wasn't love. It wasn't even recognition. It was disgust. My oldest son, Maurice, looked me up and down, taking in my simple outfit, my worn shoes, my humble appearance. And then he said those words that would haunt me forever.
Get the luggage, maid.
Get the luggage, maid. The other two didn't even acknowledge me. They turned away and walked toward the waiting car, their expensive luggage being loaded by professional handlers. I stood there, my arms still half raised, feeling like I was suffocating. Did I just hear that correctly? Did my own son just call his mother a maid? I followed them to the car, trying to make sense of what was happening. Maurice, I called out. Baby, it's me. It's your mom. He glanced at me briefly, his face completely blank. I know who you are, he said coldly. We have an event to get to. We'll deal with you later. And just like that, I was left standing on the curb, abandoned once again, watching my children drive away in a luxury vehicle toward a life that apparently no longer included me. And I didn't have a car. I didn't have their new address. I was lost in the airport, not knowing how to get to wherever they were going. But I found out soon enough. The next day, all over the local news, there were stories about the triumphant return of the Vaughn triplets. They were successful entrepreneurs, the story said. They had made their fortunes overseas. They were coming home to give back to the community. But there was no mention of their mother. I followed the news obsessively, trying to figure out where they would be and when I could see them. I finally got a call from Latasha, my only daughter. Mom, she said, her voice cold and formal. There's a welcome home party being thrown for us tomorrow night. We'd like you to come, but you'll need to help serve the guests. Yet we need someone to handle the catering and setup. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own daughter was asking me to work at her party. Not as a guest, not as a family member, but as staff. Latasha, I said quietly, I don't understand. I'm your mother. And we're very grateful for what you did, she said, and I could hear the coldness in her voice. But that was years ago. We're different people now. We've moved beyond our circumstances. And frankly, the way you look, the life you've been living, it's embarrassing. We're trying to build an image here, Mom. We can't have people thinking we didn't help our mother out of poverty. The irony of that statement was so cruel that I almost laughed. So what you're saying is, I said slowly, you don't want people to see me as your mother. You want them to see me as what? Just a maid? Don't be dramatic, Latasha snapped. Just come to the party and help us. Wear black and white like the other staff. Try not to embarrass us. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding the phone, feeling like my heart was physically breaking into pieces. My own children, the 3 people I had sacrificed everything for, were ashamed of me. But I went to that party anyway. I put on a black dress and a white apron that I borrowed from Rochelle. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back at me. I looked defeated. I looked broken. I looked exactly like what my children wanted me to look like. Invisible. The party was held at an exclusive venue in downtown Cleveland. It was beautiful, crystal chandeliers, expensive decorations, catered food, live music. And all the important people from the city were there. Business owners, politicians, social elite, and my children were at the center of it all, laughing and celebrating, acting like they had created their own success from nothing. I served drinks. I carried trays of appetizers. I cleaned up spilled champagne. I watched my children bask in the attention and accolades of people who thought they were self-made. But then I heard something that made me freeze. Across the room, I heard my son Darnell speaking to a group of investors. Yes, he was saying, Tuna, our father was instrumental in our success. He really believed in us. He kept us grounded and made sure we stayed focused on our goals. Our father? The man who abandoned us in the hospital? The man who denied that we were even his children? I dropped the tray of glasses I was holding. They shattered on the floor with a loud crash, and everyone turned to look at me. My son's eyes went wide when he saw me standing there, my face reflecting the shock and betrayal I was feeling. Mom, he said, quickly recovering. Could you clean that up, please? But I couldn't move. I was frozen, staring at him, trying to understand how he could stand there and lie about the man who had destroyed our family. Clean it up, he repeated louder this time, looking embarrassed in front of his new friends. Yet I got down on my hands and knees and picked up the broken glass. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, and I could hear the whispers starting. Is that their mother? Someone asked. It looks like it, someone replied. But they seemed so embarrassed by her. My children had built a beautiful lie, and they were living inside it. And they had made me the villain of their story. After the party, I went home and cried for hours. I cried for the children I had lost, not to death, but to something worse, to shame. They were alive, but they were no longer the people I had raised. Over the following weeks, I tried to reach out to them multiple times. I wanted to understand what had happened, how they could be so cruel. But my calls went unanswered. My texts were ignored. It was as if I had become completely invisible to them. Then, one day, I received a legal document in the mail. It was a restraining order. My children had taken out a restraining order against me, their own mother, stating that I was harassing them and preventing them from moving forward with their lives. I read that document over and over again, unable to comprehend how something so cruel could exist. The restraining order said I couldn't come within 500 feet of any of their properties. I couldn't call them. I couldn't contact them in any way. My children had officially cut me out of their lives. I was completely broken. I had nothing left. No job worth having, no family, no future to speak of. I was a 50-year-old woman who had given everything to 3 people, and they had thanked me by making me invisible. I stopped working. I couldn't bring myself to do anything. I sat in my apartment barely eating, barely sleeping. Rochelle came by regularly to check on me, but there was nothing she could say that would make this better. I had always believed that if I just worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, loved enough, my life would turn around. I had believed that my children would understand the value of what I had done for them. I had believed in the fundamental goodness of people. I had been so incredibly wrong. One day, as I was sitting in my apartment, wondering what the point of continuing to live was, I got a phone call. The woman on the other end identified herself as a lawyer representing Goodwin Capital. Ms. Vaughn, she said, we've been trying to locate you for some time. We have some important information regarding your employment history with our company. My first instinct was to hang up. And I didn't want anything to do with Goodwin Capital. They had destroyed my life once. I didn't need them to do it again. But something made me listen. During an internal audit, the lawyer explained, we discovered that you were wrongfully terminated from your position in 2010. We found evidence that you were set up by another employee, and there was no actual wrongdoing on your part. We have decided to settle this matter and provide you with compensation. I barely heard what she was saying, Wrongfully terminated. It meant that I hadn't actually done anything wrong. It meant that I had been right all along. How much compensation? I asked quietly. Well, that's the interesting part, she said. When you filled out that application for the training program, you also filled out a form for our scholarship fund. Do you remember that? I did vaguely remember filling out some additional paperwork, but I had been so focused on the training program that I hadn't paid much attention to it. That form enrolled you as an early investor in our emerging markets fund, the lawyer explained. You deposited $500 into that fund at that time. Because of market conditions and the growth of that fund over the years, your initial investment has grown significantly. Combined with the wrongful termination settlement, your total compensation comes to approximately $12 million. I thought I had misheard her. I asked her to repeat the number. $12 million, she said again. And you should also know that you have become one of our largest shareholders due to that early investment. Congratulations, Ms. Vaughn. You're a very wealthy woman. I don't remember much after that. I remember the lawyer sending me documents to sign. I remember going to the bank. I remember watching as the money was deposited into my account. I remember looking at the number on my screen and feeling absolutely nothing because $12 million couldn't buy back the time I had lost. It couldn't buy back my children's love. It couldn't make right the years of suffering and sacrifice. When the news came out that the Goodwin Capital Scholarship Fund had been funded by the early investment of a former cleaning woman, and that this woman had become one of the company's largest shareholders, my children finally reached out to me. But they didn't call. They sent their lawyers. My children wanted to know if I would be willing to support their new business ventures. Now, they wanted to know if I would help them financially. They wanted to know if I would be there for them now that they found out I had money. They wanted everything from me. I had one meeting with all three of them, despite the restraining order. They arrived at my apartment, the one I had just upgraded with a down payment on a better place. And I was struck by how they looked at me, not with love or shame or regret, just with calculation. Mom, Latasha said, putting on a smile that didn't reach her eyes, we owe you an apology. We handled things poorly when we first came home. We were overwhelmed and we didn't show you the appreciation you deserved. It was a half-hearted apology, the kind you make when you're trying to get something you want. We would love to rebuild our relationship, Maurice said. Oh, and we'd like to discuss some business opportunities that you might be interested in investing in. I looked at my three children, the people I had given everything for, and I finally saw them clearly. I saw the selfishness. I saw the greed. I saw that they didn't care about me at all. They never had. They had used the idea of me, the mythology of my sacrifice, to create a story of themselves as successful people who came from nothing. But the actual me, the real me, was an embarrassment to them. Until I had money. No, I said quietly. No? Darnell asked, confused. You haven't even heard what we're proposing. I don't want to hear it, I interrupted. I don't want to invest in your businesses. I don't want to lend you money. I don't want to help you. And I don't want a relationship with any of you. But Mom, Latasha started. Don't call me that, I said, and I was surprised by the strength in my own voice. You made it very clear that I was something to be ashamed of. You made it clear that I was a maid, not a mother. You took that from me, and now that you found out I have money, you want it back. That's not fair, Maurice said defensively. We were young and stupid. We didn't understand. You understood perfectly, I said. You understood that I was poor and powerless, and you treated me accordingly. Now that I have money, I have power, and I'm choosing to use that power to remove you from my life. For the first time in my adult life, I felt free. I had spent decades believing that my sacrifice would be enough to earn my children's love. I had believed that if I just gave enough of myself, they would see my worth. I had believed in the fundamental goodness of the human heart, but I had been wrong. The truth was harsh and simple. They had never loved me. They had taken my love for granted. They had used me as a stepping stone. And the moment they thought they didn't need me anymore, they discarded me like I was nothing. My sacrifice had been worth nothing because they had never valued it in the first place. I took my $12 million and I built a life for myself. I paid off my debts. I bought a beautiful home in a nice neighborhood in Cleveland. I took trips. I treated myself to things I had never been able to afford. I went back to school part-time and got a degree in business administration. I made new friends. I joined a volunteer organization that helped other women in situations similar to what I had experienced. That I found purpose in helping others, not in the hope of being rewarded, but because it was the right thing to do. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living for anyone else. I was living for me. My children tried to contact me multiple times over the years. When they realized I was serious about cutting them off, they tried a different approach. They showed up at my door with expensive gifts. They sent letters apologizing for their behavior. They tried to convince me that they had changed, but I had heard the lie before, and I wasn't going to fall for it again. Years passed. I was now in my 60s, healthy and content with my life. I had built something meaningful. I had friends who cared about me. I had a purpose that went beyond just surviving. Then one day I saw my daughter on the news. She was being arrested for embezzlement. Oh, apparently she had been stealing from her business partners for years. Maurice was also involved in some sort of financial fraud scandal. And Darnell had gotten involved with some unsavory people and was facing legal trouble. All of the money they had earned, all of the success they had built was coming crashing down around them. I felt nothing watching it. No satisfaction, no joy at their downfall. Just a profound sadness that they had chosen this path. After their legal troubles started, they stopped trying to contact me. They probably assumed I would use this as an opportunity for revenge or that I would turn away from them in their time of need. They were right. The truth that I had learned through all of this was simple but profound. Sacrifice doesn't guarantee gratitude. Love doesn't guarantee reciprocation. And hard work doesn't guarantee a happy ending. What I had learned was that the only person responsible for my happiness is me. The only person I can control is myself. The only love that I can rely on is the love I have for myself. This doesn't mean I stop loving my children. On some level, I will always love them because they are part of me. But I learned to love them from a distance without expecting anything in return. I learned to see their actions as a reflection of who they are, not as a judgment on who I am. I learned that being a good mother doesn't mean sacrificing everything. It means teaching your children through your actions what it means to have boundaries, to respect yourself, and to never allow anyone, not even your own children, to make you feel less than. If I could go back and tell my younger self anything, I would tell her this. Love yourself as much as you love your children. Set boundaries. Don't give more than you can afford to give. And most importantly, remember that your worth is not determined by how much you sacrifice for others. I spent 30 years of my life trying to prove my worth through my sacrifices. It was only when I stopped sacrificing and started valuing myself that I finally found peace. My story is not a story of redemption or reconciliation. It's not a story where everything works out and everyone learns their lesson. It's a story about the harsh realities of life, about how people can hurt us most deeply when we've given them the most power to do so, and about how we can survive and even thrive despite that pain. It's a story about a woman who gave everything and got nothing in return, and then learned that the nothing she received was worth more than the everything she had given because it forced her to finally invest in herself. Before we end, I want to ask you something. If you were in my situation, what would you have done differently? Would you have forgiven your children, or would you have done what I did? Would you have invested your money in helping them, or would you have kept it for yourself? Would you have sought revenge, or would you have chosen to let go as I did? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. Tell me, what do you think about my story? Do you think my children were wrong? Do you think I was wrong? Share your country in the comments, and let's have a conversation. And while you're here, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Precify Stories, And turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future stories. We have over 100 stories of different genres that you're going to absolutely love. Stories of redemption, revenge, love, betrayal, and everything in between. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Thank you for being here with me through this journey. And thank you for reminding me that my story matters, even if it took me so long to believe that myself.